Welcome to What Happened on Saturday with Marlon Kerner. My name is Josh Cormier, former coaching assistant of the Buffalo Bills, and I'm thrilled to be joined by my co-host and the star of the show, Ohio State captain and former Bill, Marlon Kerner. Marlon, how you doing?
I'm well, Josh. I don't know if I'm a star of the show, but I'm glad that you and I are doing this together.
Yes, absolutely. I've had a great time so far, and I have been able to watch college football with an eye on our show and talking about stuff, and not just as a fan of my 3-0 Fighting Irish. It's broadened my perspective on some of the other games and storylines in college football, which I would have already been following, but just being able to follow it even a little bit more closely and to be excited to talk to you. And I know we've texted throughout a few of the games. So we're going to start the episode here with Marlon's 5 key takeaways from week 2. I know you're excited to talk about Alabama, Texas, but maybe you can go down your list of what you found interesting on Saturday.
What I found interesting when you look at it, and we're going to talk about the Power Five conferences, because I think even though it's probably a little too early to say let's rank them, but I want to rank the Power Five conferences, right? So
Okay.
when I think about it, the number one conference, which is crazy and it blows my mind right now to even say this, is the Pac-12. The Pac-12 as a whole is 21-4 overall with all their teams, and they have 8 teams ranked in the top 25. And yes, that does include those Colorado Buffaloes, led by Shador Sanders, led by Travis Hunter, led by Coach Deion Sanders. They're 18th, and they're steadily climbing the rankings if they continue to win. My number two is a normal in the top five power conferences, the SEC. SEC is 23-6 overall. You still got Georgia ranked number one, Alabama number 10. So even after the loss to Texas, so you can't dismiss what the SEC does and how they play football down there. I'm going to go ahead and give a nod because I'm biased, and I'll go ahead and say it first. I will say that the Big Ten is probably the third ranked conference. They are overall 23-7. Definitely some issues, but they do have 4 teams in the top 25 with Ohio State and Michigan. I will say Michigan this time. Michigan being number 2, Ohio State 3, and you've got Michigan State, Penn State. You've got some guys that are coming up, and Iowa rounds it out at 25 as well. Then you talk about the ACC. Some really good wins by some teams in there. Florida State definitely looks good. But overall, the ACC is only 20-8 as a conference, and they do have 4 teams in the top 25, and it's not Clemson. And I'm not sad to say that. I think
I
we broke
agree with
them.
you there.
If you're a Buckeye fan, then you know what we say. We broke Clemson when we beat them a couple years ago. And then the last conference is the Big 12, and they're also 20-8, but they only have 3 teams ranked in the top 25. And
Okay,
that being
so
Texas, being with the big win and being ranked number 3.
sure. So let me ask you a couple things there. So there was a really interesting game that was maybe late for most people. The Washington State Wisconsin game. Wisconsin travels all the way to Pullman, and that game had a little bit of extra juice. I could tell because Washington State is famously left out of the dance. They don't have a
Right.
dance partner for next year, and you could tell the AD was on the field in the fourth quarter. The head coach is like just pumping his fists, and they're wearing all the pirate stuff because for Mike Leach, and it was like Mike Leach tribute day at Washington State. But there was also just a little bit extra from Big Ten opponent coming there. The Big Ten basically told them no. Right? They basically
Right.
said, we don't want you in Oregon State. Talk to me as a player. Like, what does that do? Like, how does that help you? Like, obviously, emotion is a huge part of football.
Right.
But when you're a Washington State player and you've been told no, and you got big bad Wisconsin walking in there, like, what is that? Does it last the whole game? Does it last the whole week? Like what does emotion do for you when you're kind of playing angry?
I would say some of those things, as far as being left out, it's going to leave a bad taste in your mouth as a player, and overall. But as a coach, this is your opportunity to kind of come in and say, listen, let's go show them what they're missing out on as not adding us to the conference. Like, everyone would assume, okay, you're going to take UCLA. Okay, great, fine. You're going to do a couple of things with some of the other schools in there. You're going to take USC, but why not us? Where are we going to go? So when you get an opportunity to play against one of the schools of the conferences that told you, like you just mentioned, pretty much they're not good enough to be a part of that conference, you're going to have a little extra. Kind of like what we heard when Shador Sanders did his post game. Is like, it was extra. I heard some of the things the coaches said. You're reading articles about why isn't Washington State good enough to go play in the Big Ten? or as I like to call them, the Big 14. And so
Yeah.
that's going to be a little extra motivation for you. And then to come in there and have them come into your play. And you're like, listen, and Luke Fickell is a Big Ten guy through and through. He understands it. He played at Ohio State. He understands all that. He coached at Ohio State, and now he's in the Big Ten coaching Wisconsin. First year, you want to stick it to him. You want him to remember, hey, that team's good enough to be in our conference, and I'm glad I don't have to play them once every year. And so it's kind of just a little added motivation as players. And they took it to heart. They wanted to play hard. They wanted to win that game because you want to prove that they made a mistake by leaving you out. And sometimes as a player, that's all you need. You need just that little bit of a slight for somebody to kind of say, hey, you know what? Maybe we should reconsider. Now, I don't think that happens. But
Sure.
at the end of the day, sometimes when you think about, well, if we're going to add a couple other teams, that performance right there might be a reason you go back and look at it and say, well, if we need to add two more teams to balance this out, let's go ahead and consider Washington State. So,
They
but in the
they were
big scheme of
jumping
things, it
around.
doesn't. I mean, they were definitely excited. They were hyped up. They're ready to go because it was Wisconsin, and Wisconsin, I want to say, was ranked 19 at that time
Yeah.
when they beat them. So again, you have a top 25 opponent coming, and nobody's giving you a chance to win the game, and you go ahead and pull off the upset, so to speak. Yeah, that does well for recruiting. That does well for whatever conference you're going to go in next year. It gives you some confidence, even for the following week.
What was your next takeaway?
Colorado is fun to watch. That's
Yeah.
all I could say. When you look at it, we talked about this a little bit. We looked at how when they played TCU and did the upset, and then I watched all the rhetoric all week long on Twitter. It was just fun to watch people say they're going to go undefeated, and then you have your detractors that went along and said it's one game, guys, pump the brakes. And I'm probably a little bit more realistic when it comes to things like that. And so I was thinking the same thing. Like I know it's one game, but that was an amazing performance on the offensive and defensive side of the ball. And I really wanted to see what they were going to do with a team like Nebraska, a team that they had the ability to beat. And it wasn't going to be a runaway. It wasn't going to be anything where I thought they would just be this score that it ended up being. And then to watch them struggle early in the game, because I was really wanting to see what was going to happen when you get punched in the mouth. Like, right, Mike Tyson said it best.
Yeah.
Everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth, right?
Yep.
But
Yep.
they had an answer. Colorado had an answer, and it was a slugfest early. And they got some great turnovers with the quarterback Sims dropping the ball and really killing some of Nebraska's drives. But then they capitalized on those, and then all of a sudden, they came out in the second half and they executed to perfection. And all of a sudden, it's a 10-7 game, and then it's a 17-7 game, then and then all of a sudden you're like, it's 30-something to 7. Like, this is
Yeah.
amazing to see how they played, and they played with a chip on the shoulder. And Shador Sanders is all I can say is he truly has a great command of that offense. They have an amazing scheme of how they get the ball into the hands of the playmakers, and they have a lot of playmakers on both sides of the ball.
So it occurred to me, it was the big noon kickoff on Fox. The Fox pregame show was there. It was quite a scene, outside of the stadium. What occurred to me was that was a 10 a.m. Mountain kickoff.
Right.
Talk to me about 10 a.m. kickoff. Like, I don't know. Obviously, Ohio State plays Michigan every year, famously at noon. I don't know if you ever had a kickoff earlier than noon. Like, talk to me as a college athlete. I wasn't ready for that game. I wasn't ready for college football to start at 10 a.m. I can't imagine if I was playing in a game. What do you think that's like?
All of this is just an accelerated schedule in the morning. Like, you really want to play at your normal noon or 3:30 type of kickoff. I think I might have played a couple times where it was like an 11 o'clock kickoff, just because of the way it was set up with us being in Central Time, and you're like, okay, this is how it goes. But outside of that, really, it's not that much of a difference. It just means you have to go to bed early. It means you have to get up a little earlier. So it just means you're going to have to come into it with the right mindset. And so if you're a slow starter, you can't be a slow starter on that day because you're going to play a little earlier. It's an hour earlier. It's a little different than your normal routine. And so sometimes it takes younger guys a little bit more time to really get accustomed to that because really you're just altering your schedule. Like, we're kind of creatures of habits as athletes. Everything's mapped out for us. We know when we're going to have meetings. We know when we're going to get up and eat between the times. We know when we have to go down and catch the first bus or the second bus, whatever bus we want to get over to get ready in our preparation. So it just means all that gets accelerated a little early for those players. But an hour is not that big of a deal. So it's not that big of a difference when you think of it in the big scheme of things. Of a 10 a.m. A 12 a.m. kickoff is not that big of a deal because you're already going to be up and ready to go and prepared to play anyway. And most players, because of the magnitude and what they were hearing all week. I can guarantee, because I watched some Twitter people in their comments saying, I can guarantee you they're not going to do what they did to Nebraska like they did to TCU, and they did to Nebraska like they did to TCU. So
Yeah, Were you a first bus guy, second bus guy, third bus guy to the stadium?
I liked being the second bus guy. I didn't like to be the early bus because that was too early for me. So I like to get up a little bit, and then get my little breakfast, and then get over to the stadium and get ready to go do my normal routine of warming up, going out on the field, testing the grass. I was on some special teams, so I always like to get out there early when the long snappers and the kickers were practicing, so I can just watch how the long snapper does, kind of get a feel for how he does, his cadence and his rhythm of when he's up, when he sets the ball, when he looks up, looks back, and kind of get that rhythm down, and see if I can kind of get used to his cadence and say, okay, when he does and puts his hand back, now I'm getting ready to go. And so I would practice some of those things and practice my takeoffs, and line up on the side where he was snapping and do some of those things in pregame.
Okay, we're going to go through this in more detail after the 5 key takeaways. We're going to do a week in the life of Marlon Kerner when he was at Ohio State. I think people would be really interested to hear what it was like Saturday to Saturday as a college athlete then, and maybe what it's like now. It might be a little bit different than it was when it was then. So, what was your third key takeaway?
Texas-Alabama. That was two heavyweights going at it, and I loved watching it. And it was a shame somebody had to win. I mean, I'm really not sad that Alabama won. But when you look at what Texas was able to do, they were able to really control Alabama's defensive front, and that was kind of the key, right? Can their O-line hand up to the front that Alabama was going to bring, and can Ewers really handle the pressure he was going to see? And he made all the right reads. He made all the right throws. There were so many things coming at him. With Alabama was trying to bring pressure, he stepped into it. He held onto the ball when he needed to. If he had to get a sack, he threw it away when he needed to. He really wasn't a liability. And when you look at it on the other side, Milrose, young guy, definitely has a lot of talent, but he made some critical interceptions that really put Texas in the driver's seat of the game, and they both played great. It was just a slugfest going at it, and I enjoyed watching it. That was my game of the week to watch, and it lived up to all the hype.
It sure did.
I love Texas winning that game. It was just perfect for me.
It sure did. You texted me after Quinn Ewers had that one beautiful, like rainbow bomb to the end zone. Can you just talk to me? People might have seen the play, like just the degree of difficulty of throwing the ball, 50 yards down the field on the line with guys in your face. Like, just talk to me about how difficult that is.
It's so difficult, just as an athlete and a quarterback in itself. And I think when you think about it, it's difficult on so many levels, right? So your quarterback's got to kind of get the timing of where the safety is. Now on this one, he did the rainbow ball. So he threw this Russell Wilson type ball, launched it all the way up in the air, and allowed his receiver, the speedy receiver, to run underneath it. And so when you think about something like that, it's running full speed. You got to find a ball that's so high in the air, and you've got to gauge as an athlete where it's going to drop. Now, we were told as we get a little older that the ball is going to land about 41, 42 yards on a deep ball down the field. So as a receiver, I know I've got to get to about 42 yards down the field. And as a defender, I should know that's where the ball is going to land. He threw that perfectly, and that's about what it traveled in the air. But as a receiver running full go, and then looking up like this, he has to look up over his shoulder, running full go, make sure he doesn't run out of the back of the end zone, but also catch the ball over his shoulder. It's such a degree of difficulty on the catch. Was pretty amazing. And he dropped it into the bread basket, caught it with both hands, pulled it in, hit the ground, rolled, and that was it. That was what he needed. And I think he was 0-7 so far on the season on deep balls that were over 20 yards. So it was something that he needed to hit. He hit that one, and then he hit a couple more in the game, and all of a sudden, Texas's offense was rolling.
All right, here's a couple of silly questions maybe that people, including myself, would want to know. Does the crowd affect looking up at the ball? Like
No.
if you're in a packed stadium like that? No, you can't see the crowd?
Nope, you see the crowd, but when you see the ball, you're looking back over your shoulder like this, so you don't see the crowd. And it's amazing because I've been asked this question plenty of times, and you hear the crowd, but in the moment when the ball's coming your way, it's almost like the movie with Kevin Costner. He's the picture, and he says, "Clear the mechanism." Like you don't hear anything. Like it's almost like there's complete silence. So when you see the ball in the air, you know you have to go make a play. Everything gets tuned out to the sound of. I could literally block out the entire crowd screaming, defense, or anything like that, or everybody saying boo, you could block it out, and I could only hear the guys that are in that huddle. I could literally only pick out their voices, and I know when they're saying Marlon, check, 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 and I can hear it like a pin drop, like, and it wouldn't be anything else. And then when the play is over, you go back and you can really go back and just say, okay, I can hear the crowd again. It's one of the most unique experiences, probably unique to such a crazy atmosphere like Alabama, and their stadium, or coming into the horseshoe, or going into the swamp and playing in Florida, because those crowds get really loud, they get a little crazy, and that's how athletes really deal. Like, you literally can block it out and you won't hear a sound during the play, but you'll pick it up right after the play ends.
So it's funny because I was watching. I before that the women's tennis final was on. Coco Gauff, won the
Right.
U.S. Open, and it's amazing to me how they need dead silence to serve a tennis ball. Yet, you guys are playing in front of 105,000 screaming idiots, and somehow it doesn't need to be dead silence. It's weird how in golf and in tennis, like the expectations is not just like quiet, but like dead silent. Like they'll not serve the ball if one person yells. It's just amazing to me how you guys were able to perform in front of 100,000 people, and like you said, block it out.
Yeah, I mean, but you get used to that. It's like, as a freshman, that I can tell you that was not the case for me. It took a minute to really figure that part out, but once I was able to kind of understand, this is how you play, this is what it's going to look like, filter out the noise, then it becomes a little bit more easier. And so I remember one of those stories of my freshman year. I played as a true freshman, and it's not. We were about 96, 97,000 at the time. Ohio State hadn't redone the back of the horseshoe and closed it in yet, and we played against Louisville, my second game of my young collegiate career. And they're like, "You got to go in. Somebody got injured," and I'm like, "Okay, let's go." And so I'm sitting there listening. I'm trying to get coach making a transition from playing offense to defense. We ended up winning the game. I was on the play on the last pivotal play of the game. I made the play, but I just listened to coaching, and I can tell you I didn't hear a word of the crowd screaming until after that ball hit the ground incomplete.
That's amazing. We Don and I interviewed Jabari Greer for If the Walls Could Talk in Buffalo. That's gonna be coming out this week. And it's funny. He said the exact same thing you did. He said he could hear his breath. Like when he had a big pick six against Atlanta the year that they won the Super Bowl with the Saints. And he's like, all you can hear is your own breath. And he's like, everything gets
Right.
tuned out. And clearly that's talent that you guys possess that the average citizen, including myself, just doesn't understand. Like it seems inconceivable to me. The other silly question from that play. Is there any difference between catching the ball like during the day and underneath the lights at night? Did you find it easier or more difficult one or the other?
It depends on what the weather was during the day. I played in some of those games. We played Michigan State one year, and it was a beautiful sunny day. But when I say sunny, I mean crazy sunny. We were on the sideline, so no cover, sun's just right in the eyes. It's blaring right at you, and you can't see anything. So when you throw those high balls, all you see is just shadows. Like like I can't see a soul. I can't see what's the ball's going. And so I remember playing that game. We ended up winning the game, by the way. And I remember just playing that game because I was like, I'm going to have to do something different because I literally can't see the ball. And so that's when I just kind of talked to some of my teammates, like, well, how do you see the ball? How do you talk to Joey Gallery and those guys? How do you see the ball? And I remember like, hey, you see a shadow coming at you. So, just catch the shadow. If the shadow's coming your way, knock the shadow down. So that was it. Okay. Well, the ball's coming. I can see this dark shadow, this oblong shaped shadow coming at me. Okay. Don't let him catch the shadow. And that's how we played on bright sunny days. When it's a night game, those lights can play tricks on you because when you look up into the lights, it can kind of make you misjudge where the ball is going to land. Sometimes it can just throw your vision off. So some of those guys really do have to kind of figure out where the bright spots are in the lights, and how you go in different ways of finding the ball. But it's the same concept. If you lose the ball, you just kind of track it, find the shadow, and then focus on the ball coming down. And then that's when you really got to get your hands right. Thumb to thumb, if it's pinky to pinky, or open it up, hands, and you just make sure you get everything right, so you can make that catch. And it's not always easy, as you can see. We see some of those guys drop it sometimes, but the good ones really find a way to make the play anyway.
Incredible. All right, what was your fourth
Just
takeaway?
my Buckeyes win, and they still drop in the polls, and I'm okay with that. When I think about what it is and how they played, this is what we're looking at right here. And fans are like, I don't know, like this is not the same team. Like they're not going to be a good team. I want everyone to slow down a little bit, because when you think about it, it was the same score that team is ranked number 2 that they play up north that will play them the last game of the season. It's the same score as their game. They won 35-7. We won 35-7. I think when you think about this game and what it looked like, clearly McCord is the number one quarterback for the Buckeyes. There is no more question of who's the number one quarterback. So now, if you're going to play anybody else, it's just really if you're going to play Brown, it's just really to get him some game time reps and some experience in case there's an injury and you need him to prepare for when you play Notre Dame. So that's why you're going to play him. But when you look at it, they had almost 500 yards of offense. They started fast. They got the ball to Marvin Harrison Jr. early. He had 6 or 7 catches, 160 yards, 2 touchdowns. So when you think about those things, again, it's not like the sky is falling in Buckeyeville. We just have to, we're so used to this offense clicking on all cylinders that when it looks like it's not clicking, we have some trepidation, right? We have some worries, we have some fears, and thinking of like, okay, what does this look like? Are we an average team? No, we're not an average team, but the offensive line definitely needs to play a little bit better at times. They definitely need to figure out how to sustain some drives a little bit longer, but they did some really good things on offense. We definitely need to be better on third down. You can't have your opponent be 7 of 15, a little under 50%, and you're 5 of 12. Like, that doesn't work. You always want to win the third down battle. And so we did win fourth down battle. We were 2 of 3, and they were 0 of 1, right? So when you look at that, like, we did some great things. But I go back again to what we did. They held them to 234 yards of total offense, coming off of holding Indiana to 135 yards of total offense. It's not all bad. You've got some growing pains and a young quarterback. You tried to play 2 quarterbacks. It was 28-7 at the half, and then you only scored 7 more points in the second half because you were alternating quarterbacks and trying to get a little bit more experience. Had you played McCord in the second half, you might have put up another 21 points. And all of a sudden, now they're still staying at 5 or maybe even moving up to 4. So I don't want everyone to think that I think this team is ready to compete for the national championship, because I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is they are doing some good things. They are finding their stride. The defense is playing extremely well early. Denzel Burke had an interception. Sonny Styles played well. Josh Proctor played well. The linebackers played well. You're getting pressure without having to blitz. That is going to bode well for later in the season. So you can't sit up here and just say it's over. We don't look dominant. We don't look dominant because we don't have CJ Stroud. We don't have a Justin Fields, right? So you don't have a JT. Like, we've had the luxury of having some quarterbacks that have been in the system for a long time that were number 1 overall recruits, really highly touted and highly rated, and that really had the experience going into it. And this is what we don't have right now, which leads me to the first point, and the number 1 overall observation that I saw is there are going to be some teams, Alabama, Ohio State, Nebraska, and others, that are going to live and die by the play of their young quarterback. And so I put Ohio State in that boat because I think McCord has done enough to win the number 1 job, but we don't know what the strategy is going to be this week. So again, when you think about those things, those guys have got to figure it out, really. And it's something that we don't necessarily always see, right? Even Clemson, young quarterback play killed Clemson when they played Duke. And they were able to come back last week and win. But again, as the young quarterback grows and develops, that's going to be the key of, can Alabama get back and really make a run in the SEC? Can Ohio State make a run in the Big Ten East, which is the toughest division out of the Big Ten? And so we'll find out. We'll find out from week in and week out.
Right on. So your Ohio State point, I mean, this was pretty much the second game of their 3-game preseason before the Notre Dame opener. Your fans are spoiled, frankly, right? Like you said, CJ Stroud, Justin Fields. It's tough when you don't have an experienced first-round draft pick quarterback. You're going to make mistakes. It's not going to always look pretty. You're right. You guys were a machine on offense for the last 5 years minimum, and it's just it makes it frustrating for a fan who expects perfection on every drive, on every play. So I don't envy your position of trying to defend, the Buckeyes here, because perfection is just not going to happen with a young quarterback. It's just not. No, it's not. Like you said, CJ Stroud and Justin Fields are gone, and it doesn't mean that this kid isn't going to be great too, but he's just not there yet. And that's okay. Like, there's no other way, and they don't put their foot on the gas in the second half against Youngstown State, right? Like, I mean, 35-7 or 49-7. What's the difference?
No difference in my book, but when you compare it to some of the other teams that won 63-7 over the weekend, or
Sure.
somebody dropped 70 points. You're like, why didn't you score 70 points? I think one thing that we don't talk about enough is the new clock rules. And I want to talk to our future guest, the former
Yes.
referee, about that, because I don't think people really understand the dynamics of the clock used to stop on every first down so they could set to change, and then in the 5 minutes it would stop, and so that extends games, that allows drives to kind of pick up and go, and the clock is continuous until you get into the last 2 minutes now. And so you look at that Ohio State game, Youngstown State won the battle in possession. Like, they had more time of possession than Ohio State did, even though they lost 35-7. And you're going to see games like that where the opposing team is just going to try to go slow, grind it out. Even if they don't score a lot of points, they're going to try to grind it out, make it a slow clock game, and end up winning the time of possession against their opponent, even though they might lose 35-7 or 42-7 or 49.
That was Nebraska. That was Nebraska. They were snapping the ball with 2 seconds left on the play clock on every play to just shorten the game. And just simple math. Ohio State's not going to have as many plays against Youngstown State as they would have last year or 2 years ago. And if they have 10 less plays, that probably means 7 less points. Just from simple math. And the other thing that's interesting as a fan, boy, they didn't shorten the length of the broadcast, so they've jammed a lot more commercials in. It's a tough watch. Man, that Texas-Alabama game just dragged on and on, and I've seen the same 5 commercials probably 40 times now after watching a full day of football.
Absolutely.
The other thing I wanted you to comment on, Notre Dame, they started at noon, they played a quarter, and then there was a heavy storm and a lightning delay. Were you ever in a lightning delay?
I think there was a game one time where it wasn't on the collegiate level for me, but there was a game on the professional level where we had to go back into the locker room and wait a little bit. And so when you think about those things, think about your mental makeup of what has to happen now, right? So you go through your entire process. You're warming up as an athlete. We're going to kick off. So you have kind of a routine of, I go out at this time, I warm up, I come back in, I get taped, I get certain things done, I make sure I hydrate, I might go over the last few checks that we might have on offense or defense on the scouting report, and then we know by position, defensive backs are going to come out at a certain time. Your specialists, your kickers, your punters, your return guys are going to go out, receivers will come out at a certain time, then the full offense and team will come out. We'll do something together as an entire group, go back, do all those things, go back into the locker room, get our last minute instructions from coaches, get our little pep talk from the team captains, whoever is that motivational speaker on the team, and then you're pumped and amped and ready to come out and play. And then you're going to have the kick, you're going to have the national anthem, and all those things are going to happen to get you ready to go, that says, turn on, get your mind right, ready to go. You're flying like bullets. You play a quarter, and then you got to go and sit. Now you got to go sit with no warning of, hey, when is this game going to be called? Like, how much time do we have? Hey, another flash of lightning. We got another 30 minutes. We got to wait. So it turned out to be a very long wait. And so now you're hungry. Now you're cold again because you go through your whole stretch, your routine to warm up, get your muscles ready to play. So it can be an emotional letdown. And I thought that's what happened to Notre Dame with that long rest. They had the NC State came back. Like, they had a moment to kind of say, okay, listen, because it works one of two ways. If you're in the driver's seat, it kills momentum. It kills everything you're doing. It allows the coaches to go back and pull some of the snapshots that they had. Like, they line up in this formation. They did this. They did that. So you can kind of go back and say, we're going to do this when we come back out of halftime, when we come out of this delay, rather, and we're going to do X, Y, and Z. And I thought NC State really did that. I thought they did some really good things against Notre Dame. And then all of a sudden, quarterback play. Right? All of a sudden, you start doing some things. He makes a couple throws. They get a turnover late. He makes another throw. And then this thing is out of hand. And all of a sudden, now you break I think it was like a 30-game streak of not allowing 30 points at home. And they broke that streak just because they were able to weather the storm, literally, and then come out and weather the storm of NC State, and then get back into that groove and that rhythm that they had on offense and defense.
Talk to me about an away locker room. Probably not the most comfortable place for an entire team to be for 2.5 hours. Like, I've been in away locker rooms in the NFL, and they're not great. I can only imagine like an older stadium like NC State, Carter Finley Field. Probably not like glamorous accommodations for the road team, whereas the home team, probably comfy chairs, a lounge, that probably had to be a miserable 2.5 hours for Notre Dame.
definitely had to be miserable. And think about you order snacks at halftime, so you don't order enough snacks to handle a 2.5 hour delay. So when you think about those things, they had to go and get more food. I want to say that I hear a report of them going out to the
You got
concession stand,
bratwursts
getting
and hot
bratwurst and
dogs.
hot
Yeah.
dogs for guys to eat. Now I don't know if I would want to eat bratwurst, knowing I'm about to go back and play, because I'm going to guess that may come up for a guy like me, but some of those big guys, like, I'm starving, like, feed me. You got to fuel, because again, they've been amped and ready to go, and they went through all the snacks that they had, and that's not enough for a 2.5 hour delay. So yeah, it's interesting just to think about it. It's not comfortable, and when you think about it, it's not like being at home. When you're at home, you have all the amenities you want. You've got some really comfortable lockers to sit in. They probably have the old metal lockers that you have, not really big enough. Like, they give you the bare minimums. When you talk about visitors locker room, we played Iowa one of my years, and Hayden Fry was their head coach, known for playing those mind games with people, and they painted their visitor locker room pink.
Oh, jeez.
So you walk in and it looks like one of the old high schools from one of those old movies like Rudy. Like, man, this is a terrible locker room, and it's all pink. And I'm like, okay, I can't wait to get out here and hit you guys. Like, he thought it was going to be something that would make people little less, more docile, right? Maybe kind of like, it's pink, who cares? And they kind of had sometimes a mental edge by doing that. It didn't work for us. We beat them like 35-3 that game. But
That's funny.
again, like, those visitor locker rooms are not the most comfortable places to sit for 2.5 hours.
Right. Even in the NFL, I remember being at the old Foxborough, and that stadium was a dump to begin with, and then the visiting locker room was just awful. I mean, just absolutely awful. And I remember Karl Mock was yelling and screaming because there was no hot water after the game for a shower because it rained, and oh my God, you would have thought he was being murdered in the shower because there was only cold water. And
That sounds about right.
that sounds about, yeah. It was quite a scene. Yeah. So all right, now that we have your 5 key takeaways, and before we look ahead to week 3, which is not nearly as glamorous as the week 2 slate, and then week 4 is dynamite going forward to talk about next week. And obviously, next week, hopefully, both the Buckeyes and the Irish will take care of business this week, and we'll look forward to the big matchup a week from Saturday. But I thought it might be fun to maybe walk people through kind of a week in the life of a college athlete, like you were, and maybe take it from the perspective of Ohio State. You play a noon game on Saturday. You beat Youngstown State. What does the rest of Saturday night look like for a guy like you, when you played or today?
So when I played, what would happen after that game? You come back, you win. You're going to get any treatment for any injuries that you might have right after the game. So, if you got any dings, anything sore, you're like, hey, coach, this is going on. Or, hey, head trainer, this is going on. And they're going to say, hey, you're good. Come in for treatment tomorrow. Okay. And then after that, you go back home. You're going to go back to your apartments. You're going to go back to the dorms. Just going to kind of relax, get some food with some friends, maybe go to sleep for a little bit. If there's something going on, you may try to hang out with your guys. And sometimes some guys might go to parties. Not saying that I did or did not do that. I can confirm or deny. But yeah, I went to a couple parties a couple times, just like, all right, that's it. Nothing crazy. Didn't stay out too late, just to hang out with the guys. Sunday was considered a day off, depending on the schedule of where it was. So you would come in, and some coaches would be like, hey, I'm going to give you Sunday off, or I'm going to give you Monday off. It just depends on how the coach felt. If you played well, Sunday could be a day off, and you come back in on Monday and hit it running. If you didn't play well, you're coming back in on Sunday, and then you might get a Monday off, a little bit of time off to yourself, just to kind of recuperate and relax. So it kind of fluctuated on us, but most of the time a Sunday was considered a day off.
Would you watch the NFL on Sunday?
Yeah, watch some games a little bit, just kind of sit up there and relax a little bit. If there was any issues, aches or pains, I would go into the training room, go get into the cold tub, and do some things like that, just to kind of get ready for the rest of the week. And so if that was a day off for Sunday, so we'll assume Sunday was a day off. Monday would then be coming back in. You're going to watch the game film from Saturday. You're going to kind of talk about how we graded out. That's where you kind of find out how you did plus minus wise, what you need to work on going forward. And then we put that game behind us, and then we'll kind of briefly talk about the next week's opponent. Kind of, hey, here's what's going on. Here's what we're playing. Here's this, here's that. Here's the key guys. Here's their formations, all those things. So you're going to get that information and start looking at that scouting report and reading that. Tuesday will be a practice day for us. So you come back the next day, Tuesday, get ready to go. And all this was back when they had like a 20-hour rule. The NCAA says, you're only allowed to put in 20 hours. So you would have to fill in the gaps of when you're going to study. and go to class and do all those things. So for us, we try to make sure we had all of our classes early.
Okay.
And so either you took all your classes early so you could be done by 1:30, 2 o'clock at the latest, so you could leave and then go do some practice time between 2:30 and 5:30. And then if you had to take another class, you could take a late class at 6. And then for if you didn't have a late class, then you could have what we call training table and study hall or study table. So we would after practice we go get dinner because that was always provided for us 24 all year round. We had our own dining hall. I was a little spoiled at Ohio State, so I'm not going to lie and say that we didn't. We had some really good amenities. We had our own dining hall. We had some great things going on. After every Monday game, we always, if we won, we would always get either steak and lobster tail. So some
Oh,
really cool things that we did. Like, so I was kind of like, this is kind of interesting. Is it like this on the NFL level? Like, no, you're responsible for your own food. I was like, oh, okay. Well, at Ohio State, I got this, and so just kind of some of the differences. And then Wednesday would be the same thing as a Tuesday. You're getting ready for your practice and getting all those things done. Thursday is your light practice, and everybody's a little different. You focus on certain things. So like even like on the NFL, like you might go heavy on the run formations on a Tuesday, and then you go a little bit more on their short yardage packages, and then we might go red zone practices on that Thursday. They really say this is what they do if they get in the red zone. So you kind of really practice the scenarios and situations and your special teams plays and all those things throughout that practice. And then Friday was always an interesting day because if it was an away game, then it was a travel day. So suit and tie, we had to get into, and then as a team, we always went to the country club. We had our own little country club that we went to, and so they would take us there for dinner. And the one thing I loved is you had to tell them you're either going to have chicken or steak. So we either have filet mignon and all these other things for dinner, or you could get chicken. And then they had the amazing little Buckeye. We had these little pecan rolls, and they were like
mm,
they were huge. These massive pecan rolls, and I loved them because it was kind of a staple. We always did that no matter what. We would go there, we'd eat, and then even if it was a away game, we'd eat there first, and then get on a plane and bus to the airport and get on a plane and then fly. Depending on where we're going, if it was an easier flight, we would eat there and then go on a plane. If it wasn't, then we just go straight from the facilities right to the airport, hop on, and then we'd have food at the place depending on how long of the play it was. But if it was a home game, we always went there, and then as a team we would go to the movies as a team, which is one of
okay.
the coolest things ever. I'm not sure what they do now, but we would rent out a couple theaters and then just go. So we would go there as an entire team. We go in and say, you can either watch this movie or you go watch this movie. And then we would just go in and they would hand us the tickets. Hey, I'm going to go watch this movie. You buy your own concessions because we would get per diem for the game for the weekend. The NCAA at least gave us a little bit of money.
Mm.
And so you could buy that. You could get some room service if you were hungry when you got there. And then from a home game, we'd watch the movie. Then we would bus down to the Hyatt on Capitol Square, and we would stay in a hotel overnight. They didn't want us staying in the dorms to be around any partying or anybody else. So they would keep us isolated and away from everyone else. And again, we'd get there, we'd do our own little things as far as last meeting with our coaches. So all the DBs get together, talk about, hey, remember this, remember that. When they get into formation, this is the check that we're going to make. And so we did some really cool things. And then we would always have Wendy's catered. So
Oh,
like we got fed. We always got fed. So then we would get there. Like if anybody's hungry, if you want a snack, there's Wendy's. So you could get deluxe burgers. We had these massive chocolate chip cookies and hot chocolate and chocolate milk. So they were really big back then about making sure we had enough food and fuel to eat. And then you say, okay, depending on the time of the game, you get up. We'd always have breakfast together as a team. So we'd always have to get dressed, be ready to go again, down back together. Again, we'd have the craziest breakfast. They always had everything laid out. So pancakes, eggs, hash browns, steak, and spaghetti. So you had all that at breakfast just to make sure you had enough carbs to make sure you could play that game. And then we got bussed down. Depending on which bus you take, you get on the first bus early, which is done by a caravan. So you had police escort back in. And then second and third buses would go out. And then the last bus would go. And you get there and then come down and get ready to go and get your mind right to play a game.
All right, a couple questions for that. That was awesome. That was an awesome recap. I enjoyed listening to it, and hopefully everybody else did as well. So, a couple questions. How much interaction did you have with, like, quote unquote regular students during a week?
I would have a lot of interaction. I was my freshman and sophomore years. I stayed in the dorm. So I had guys that were regular students. I think one of my week mates, my sophomore year, he played on the basketball team, so we interacted a little bit. And then I was always a roommate with another football player. And then you just kind of go to class, you say hello, you have all the interaction you can to try to be normal and just meet as many people as you can. I mean, Ohio State had 50,000. I think when I was there, it's 56,000 people that was in the undergrad and was one of the largest schools in the country when I was there. And I would still imagine they're still one of the largest schools as an undergrad population in the country. So you have the opportunity to meet so many different people and talk to so many different people from so many different areas, from different states, from different places in Ohio, from different places of the country, even from outside of the United States. So I tried to make sure I just said hello and talk to as many people as I could. And so that's why going to the union and just meeting people and bumping into people and saying, what do you do? Talking to people in my class was really good for me. Just to kind of open up my own eyes of somebody growing up in Columbus. Like, it's a much bigger place that coming to Ohio State, and it's a much bigger world than my own little zip code that I was used to be and accustomed to being around.
Sure. So in the off season, like once the season's over with,
Yeah.
second, spring semester, what did that look like?
Oh my gosh! Like, now, this is where it was crazy for me because I've never got to take a spring break ever in my entire
Mhm.
life when I was there at college because we always had spring ball. So I think there's a documentary of the Freak Meet coming out, and we always wanted to go as players to Freak Meet in Atlanta. One of the craziest get-togethers that you could think of. I think all the rap people now descending into Atlanta and just having a weekend party just out on the streets and traffic everywhere. That was Freaknik. And I never got to experience that because we always had spring ball, and so for us, you got a little bit more freedom as far as when you could take your classes because you didn't have all the practice regulations and stipulations. You just had to make sure you came over and lifted so many times a week, and then you had your workouts that we had, and we had some crazy workouts. Like, we used to have our little hell week that we would call, so to speak, where we would have to come in and you'd have to be there ready to go by 5:30. We started exactly at 6 o'clock in the morning, and it was one of the most intense workouts that you would ever want to experience, from sleds to bands to all the calisthenics that you're going to do, stretching and everything else. But then we had all of the box jumps we had to do and hurdle jumps that we had to do. We did some crazy workouts that made you really become more explosive. And the plyometric works we did, like we had 60-inch box jumps that we had to do for a minute straight. And we get in three groups of, like, our position groups rather, and you'd have three groups of three guys going at the same time, and you'd have a minute straight, and you just jump, and it's just continuous jump on the box, 60-inch box jump, step down, jump up, and you had to do it a certain way with coaches watching you and telling you, nope, that's not right. And they were wooden box jumps. So I don't know if you ever did wooden box jumps and you missed. Talk
Oh
about
yeah,
the most intense pain on your
oh,
shins. I've
God,
had a
it
few
sounds
bloody
awful.
shins and some ripped up shins for that. So I just made sure I exploded up. But when you got done, you were ready to play. You were ready to go to spring ball. So we would do all that leading up to spring ball, and then we would have our practice in spring balls, and make sure you had all your time. Again, you had to make sure that you're ready to go for those practice times in the afternoon. So coaches would tell you, hey, spring ball starting, so you can't have a class during this time. So make sure you get that going. And so it was pretty good. We had a well-oiled machine and some really great and conditioning coaches, and Dave Kennedy and Coach L. Really appreciate what they were able to do for me, and really get me into the right mindset of being a collegiate athlete. Because, again, I think we talked about one of the episodes about what it takes to be a good high school athlete. It now changes to become an even better collegiate athlete. You got to change your mindset and really put in a lot more work. And those guys really did make us work, and we worked hard.
Did you did you find that you offensive linemen famously will gain 20, 30, 40 pounds in the off season because you were a track guy, because you were a DB? Like, were you strict on your diet and alcohol consumption, whatever, during the off season? No.
No, I wasn't strict on my diet because I was a lean guy. We ran so much. Like, I was one of those kids that I could eat whatever I wanted, and I would never gain weight. Like, I think I spent my entire summer of my senior year eating all this crazy food, trying to bulk up as a quarterback. because I was only 160 pounds. Like, if somebody hits you good, like, I don't know if you're going to survive. And I went to bed every night drinking a milkshake. I make the thickest milkshake that you could think of. And I was only able to gain 5 pounds of an entire 3-month summer drinking milkshakes every night. And I'm like, okay, so look, I had really good genes as far and a really good metabolism. So for me, McDonald's, like,
Wow, yeah.
I could eat McDonald's. I ate McDonald's all the time because it was right on campus. So when you're like, hey, I don't feel like cooking today, hey, let's go to McDonald's. All right,
This
cool.
might be
So,
the thing I've been able to relate to you the least of anything you've said. I can get with catching something down the field 45 yards or whatever else. This one, no, sir. Yeah, and I think I'm probably in the majority here of people that didn't apply for me. So good for you.
I mean, but I'm not saying I ate McDonald's every day.
Of
Right?
course, of
But
course.
if it was just kind of, what, I want to get McDonald's, or for me, I love Frosties. So that was kind of my thing. You know what? Let me go find me a Frosty somewhere. Like, that was kind of it. Like, even if I didn't eat the fries or a hamburger, I was probably gonna get a Frosty because that was my thing. And so, yeah, I mean, but I could do that because I knew that, and I knew I was always going to be in weight. And we ran so much. Like, we were always running, always doing something. So I was just really replacing calories that I had already burned off. I
Sure.
probably didn't eat enough, if I'm going to be honest. And that, I think that was probably the difference from my collegiate experience and then getting to the NFL, because then I had somebody who was like, you can't eat like that. You got to eat like this and do that. And Rusty Jones, he
Rusty
was a
gave you hell.
stickler.
Yeah.
Like,
Yes.
Rusty gave you so much, like, you can't eat that. Like, and if you want to eat that, think like if you're going to eat 3 meals a day, one of the 21 meals you're going to eat out of the week, it can be bad. Okay, Rusty, if that's what you said, okay, I can do that. Yeah, sure.
So let me tell you a funny story. You don't know this. So when I got promoted over the football department, I was heavy. I was a big guy, and Max Bowman, tight ends coach, and the assistant head coach, he said, you got to drop some weight. So you can't be on the sideline looking like a fat ass. You got to drop some weight. So he takes me down to Rusty's office, and you know what they did to me, Marlon? They put me in the bod pod. Oh my god! And now it was like being walked to your own execution. I didn't even know what the bod pod was. I'm down in just some tights, and I get out of there, and Rusty's like, "What happened to you? How'd you let yourself go like this?" I'm like 24 years old, and I'm thinking, "Hey man, I just got this promotion. I'm a big deal," and he's just letting me have it. And just
Yeah,
you got
that
to eat
sounds
better.
right.
He put me on a strict. I dropped 60 pounds in 3.5 months.
Impressive.
So
That
yeah,
sounds about right. That sounds right. That's Rusty right there.
that
And
was
John
one of the most.
was John still there then? Or
Yes.
was
Yep.
okay? Yeah.
Yep.
Those
And
are my
Rich Gray.
guys.
And Rich Gray. And Rich Gray.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was one of the most humiliating experiences of my life, was going in that bod pod, because Rusty was like calling people over, being like, "Hey, look at this guy! Look at this guy! This is what happens when you don't work out." And I'm like, "Oh my God, Rusty, I get it. Like, okay, you've shamed me enough here, but God love him. I mean, he helped change my life, and he helped change my eating
Absolutely.
habits, and he was fantastic. So that was, that was a memory I hadn't thought about in a long time. So before we wrap it up here today, maybe we could talk a little bit about the Week 3 slate. What you're looking forward to, and maybe the game of the week in your eyes.
Absolutely. I think, like you said, there's not a lot of heavy matchups. I think this is one of the weeks where you kind of get through the last tune-up before you're getting ready to go and kick off all your division games. So for Ohio State, we're going to play Western Kentucky. We're 27.5-point favorites. So in essence, we should win this game. Again, what I'm looking for, really what I'm looking for, is McCord to take all the snaps. I don't really want to see this two quarterback playing anymore. I really want him to kind of get a good handle on the offense. I want to see us and our offensive line get a little bit more dominant up front, because we do have the size advantage against Western Kentucky. So I want to see them really show that they can be a dominant and handle some of the twists and schemes that they're probably going to see against Western Kentucky. And I want to see them really establish a run game, right? So we saw Henderson pop a long run, but again, we just don't look as dominant as we used to, being able to do our screen game. And I want to see just get that continuity there when it comes to that. But it's a game we should win, and so I'm not going to say we are going to win, because I don't want to jinx us. So I'll just say, if they play the way they're supposed to play, it should look like last week when we played Youngstown State. We should definitely exert our will and come out with a victory if we play well and all goes well in this game. The game I'm looking for, there's two games I'm really actually looking forward to watching. Again, Colorado right now is must-see TV. So I'm
Yes.
just going to continue to watch this run that they're having and watch what Shedeur Sanders is doing on offense. I mean, think about 2 games over 900 yards passing in 2 games as a quarterback. That's just amazing. Travis Hunter over 200. Well, he didn't have over 100 yards last week, but still made some good catches, about 70 yards. So he's almost about too close to 200 yards receiving in 2 games. So I want to see what those guys can do. I want to see them really, if they can get a little bit more stronger in the front, their front four on defense. I think that was one of the weaknesses, and I thought Nebraska got away from exploiting that run that they were able to do early because they threw a turnover and they got down, and I thought they panicked going into the second half. It wasn't that bad of a game. It wasn't that far away from them had they just continued to run the ball. So I want to see if teams kind of take that blueprint of, hey, you know what? The clock's running. Let's just run the ball. Stop the ball in 2 seconds. Keep the ball out of their hands because their offense reminds me of the old K-gun offense that Jim used to run. They get the ball out. They come to the line of scrimmage. They look. They check. And then they go and they fire on all cylinders. And they spread you out like Jim did in the K-gun. So anybody that remembers the K-gun, that's kind of how this offense looks and how they run. They run at a very fast tempo. So if you haven't seen it, you haven't experienced, it's something to watch. And I would encourage you, if you get a chance, to check it out. Even if you check out some YouTube highlights, they're fun to watch on offense. But the other game is in the SEC, Tennessee and Florida this week. Tennessee is 2-0. Florida's 1-1. They lost their opener at Utah. And so I want to see if Florida can really kind of get back. They won last week, so now they're 1-1 going into this game. And I just want to see that SEC matchup. The winner can kind of put themselves in the driver's seat with Alabama already having a loss. So you kind of want to make sure you kind of keep that going. And this is a division game. So you really want to make sure you get a leg up because you don't want to already start this young season off and have a division loss.
Notre Dame plays Central Michigan, very similar spot to Ohio State. Get through it injury free, work on your fundamentals, just buckle down. They had some offensive line issues with the crowd noise and the weather last week. I'd like to see that kind of get settled down. The quarterback clearly is not a question mark. Audric Estime, my man, the running back, he's Jerome Bettis 2.0. He reminds me so much of Jerome Bettis. His feet are so nimble, like he's able to go side to side almost as quickly as he's able to go north and south, which for a guy who's like 5'11", they list him at 230. I'm pretty skeptical that he's 230. He looks bigger than 230 to me. He's a big boy, and when he gets moving, it's a nightmare for a defensive. Yeah, I can imagine somebody like you trying to tackle Audric Estime. That's
I'll come in. Like, now that's one thing. Don't sleep over here. We came up. We took pride in tackling. Even if we got ran over, we was gonna make the tackle.
Well, there you go. There you go. And I think an interesting game early. Florida State goes to Boston College, and Boston College clearly doesn't have the athletes, whatever. That's a sleepy game. It's all the way up there in Boston, and it's kind of a trap game for Florida State, right? They might be looking ahead, and that's one of those games where you just see it, and you look up in the third quarter, and Florida State's like up by 3. And you're like, what's going on here? Maybe they'd be sloppy or whatever else. So that's a noon game that I'm kind of interested in. College game day this week is going to Colorado, and like I said, Fox big noon kickoff last week was at Colorado, and that was quite a scene. Coach Prime came onto the set, and it was like watching like a religious figure come onto the scene. Everybody's hugging him, and the crowd's going crazy. And they added Mark Ingram to the stage, and they were almost just like deferential to Deion. It was amazing. Even like Coach Meyer, Urban Meyer was almost in awe of him. That scene was crazy.
It's crazy because you forget that Deion is a head coach because of his persona as an athlete, being the only athlete to play in a World Series and a Super Bowl. Just what he's able to do, Hall of Fame defensive back. I mean, he's the guy that every corner in my era, and even young guys now, look to be like, I want to play like Deion. He was brash, he was cocky, he was arrogant, he talked his game, he told you what he was going to do, and he backed it up. And he's doing the same thing on the football field. And so we're not used to seeing that, but his persona and who he is bigger than life, is larger than life. And so you get to see firsthand about the reverence that people have and the respect that people have for just Deion, just Deion, Prime. Deion, and then you're like, oh, wait a minute, that's a coach. Like, he's also the head coach of Colorado. So it's just amazing just to see how well he's done, how the guys have bought into what he's doing, and they've handled all the adversity so far very well. And so again, it's one of those games. It's Colorado State, right? It's an in-state rivalry. It's one of those games where the score is not going to be indicative of the heart and effort that's going to be laid out on that field. So I'm just going to go and watch it and see what they do and see if Colorado State can find a weakness. And then if they can exploit that weakness, or if Dion and his coaching staff can then go back and say, we're going to do this to fix that weakness. And what you thought was a weakness is now a strength on our side. And we're going to go away and win this game running away.
And don't get caught looking ahead to Oregon and USC in the next
Right.
2 weeks, which
Exactly.
there's a lot of temptation there because those are two big boy matchups. Next Monday, I know we're going to talk about the Irish and the Buckeyes, the showdown. Hopefully, we'll be joined by a guest or two to maybe preview that matchup. I'm excited for that. Maybe there'll be a little bit of a little small wager on the game from Marlon and I'm feeling comfortable with my man Sam Hartman, who frankly is looking like touchdown Jesus. Like seeing him on the field before the game, he literally looks like Jesus.
Listen, that's high praise. I'm not going to.
I didn't say he's acting like him. I just said he looks like him. I mean, he's got the full beard and the flow going. He looks like he's 35 years old out there. It's amazing.
So what you're saying is he probably walks on campus with Birkenstocks too, right?
Yeah, that's probably yes. Yeah, he definitely. If you saw him on campus, you would not think he's the starting quarterback for Notre Dame. So we're really excited about that. Please, everybody, like and subscribe to the show. That really helps us out. Final thought, Marlon.
I'm looking forward to seeing what the rest of this college football season is going to bring. Week 3 is just going to be another chink into it of another weekend of just watching college football. I'm loving it. I will say there's one other matchup in our backyard that nobody's talking about. Syracuse is going to play Purdue. Syracuse is 2-0 and looking pretty good. So even in our backyard, ACC team looking good. So I would definitely say, that's another matchup that we probably should add. But again, as you so eloquently put it, like if you really like what we're doing, please like and subscribe. Give us feedback. Tell us what we do well, what we don't do well. If I say too much, you can say that and tell me that. I'm okay with that. If you don't
There
like
you go.
Ohio State at all, that's okay. You can say Ohio State sucks. I know some people like to send me little tweets and text messages about Michigan or that team up north. You can say that. It's okay. We just want to get your feedback and really learn how to really put on the right type of information in this podcast so you can really learn more about college football, and we'll talk about that as the season goes along.
Absolutely.
FCS, FBS, all that stuff. What does it mean? What's the difference? We'll talk about all that as the season goes along.
For sure. Syracuse and Purdue is on NBC Saturday night at 7:30. So my guy Pat Walsh, who a close friend of mine and a professor of sport management at Syracuse, I know he'll be watching Syracuse against Purdue. So everybody, thank you so much for tuning in, and we will see you next week. Go Irish.
Go Buckeyes.